Greetings, my name is Fergus of the musical duo Éiníní. When I'm not making music with my lovely companion Winifred, one of my favorite pastimes is playing board games. So I would like to introduce you to a few games that were known at some point in the Middle Ages or Renaissance, somewhere in Europe. I'm going to give you a brief overview of these games so as not to take up too much time. And I'm also not going to talk about the three most well-known games, chess, draughts, or checkers as it's known in America, and backgammon. You already know these games. You don't need me to talk about them. So, let's begin. We start with Nine Men's Morris. This game dates back at least to the Romans, referenced in a document from 8 CE, with some scholars claiming that evidence places the game as far back as 1400 BCE, and some suggesting that it was played in China as far back as 500 BCE. Regardless of the age, it was very popular throughout Europe in the Middle Ages and beyond. Game boards have been found carved into cloister seats in various English cathedrals. It is played on a board made up of 3 concentric squares, with the midpoints of each square connected by a line. Each of the 2 players has 9 pieces, and they take turns placing them onto the intersections of the lines, trying to form a row of 3 along the printed lines. If a player makes such a row, he captures one of his opponent's pieces. Once all pieces are on the board, play continues by moving a single piece along a line to an adjacent space. Forming rows of 3 still results in capturing an enemy piece. If a player is reduced to 3 pieces, they are no longer limited to moving to adjacent spaces, but can jump to any empty space. If a player reduces his opponent to 2 pieces, they are declared the winner. Three Men's Morris. Three Men's Morris is a variation of Nine Men's Morris, and the 2 were likely played alongside one another in the same times and places. It works on the same principles as Nine Men's Morris, but on a smaller board and with only 3 pieces per player. First, players take turns placing pieces on the board, then moving 1 piece to an adjacent space. The first player to form a row of 3 is the winner. Tafl Games. There are many names for this game, depending on the culture from which the specific variant originates. Hnefatafl in Norse, Brondúv in Irish, Ardrí in Scottish, Talbúrth in Welsh, and Tablut in Sami. The origins are lost to history, but it was popular all over northern Europe until the 12th century, although the Tablut version in northern Scandinavia continued to be played into the 1700s. As a result, Tablut is the only version that has surviving unambiguous rules. Still, by extrapolating, it's fair to assume that the rules of the other versions are similar enough to be fairly accurate. Depending on the version, the board may be a number of different sizes, from a 7x7 grid to an 18x18 board, various numbers and arrangements of starting pieces. This version is traditionally accepted as the standard form of the Norse Hnefatafl. The attacker is arranged around the outside, and the defender has half as many pieces, plus the added king, in the center. All pieces move like rooks in chess, any number of spaces vertically or horizontally. Capturing is done by bracketing. If you move a piece so that you have 2 pieces on either side of an enemy piece, the enemy piece is captured. The object for the attackers is to capture the king. The defender's object is to get the king to any edge of the board. Game of the Goose. This game is thought to have originated in the 16th century, becoming quickly popular in Europe and retaining its fame to modern times. A copy was gifted to King Felipe II of Spain in the late 1500s, and in 1597 it was entered into the Stationer's Register. The game is similar to Snakes and Ladders, or Chutes and Ladders as it's known in America. Players roll dice and move spaces equal to the number rolled. However, some of the spaces have symbols on them which cause certain effects. Landing on a goose causes you to move forward a number of spaces equal to the number you just moved. It effectively doubles your die roll. The bridge moves you ahead 6 spaces. The maze sends you back to square 30. The tavern causes you to lose 2 turns. The death space sends you back to the beginning, and so on. The first player to land on the last space is the winner, but you must land there by exact count. Any moves remaining once you reach the last space are taken backwards, moving you away from the finish line. Fox and Geese. The first known reference to this family of games comes from the 14th century in Scandinavia. It is recorded that King Edward IV of England purchased 2 sets. It can be concluded that it was popular at least in Northern Europe in the late Middle Ages. There are many variations on this game. Some are played on a cross-shaped board, others on a square board. There are either 1 or 2 foxes and between 4 and 20 geese. Various versions refer to them with different names. Some use wolves, hounds, or devils instead of foxes, and sheep, hares, or tailors instead of geese. The geese can only move forward or sideways, and depending on the version, their goal may be to fill all the spaces in the far arm of the cross, or to block the foxes so that they cannot move. Some versions allow the foxes to capture the sheep by jumping over them, in which case captures are mandatory, and others allow the foxes only to block the geese. The version you play determines whether the fox's goal is to capture all the geese, or to simply prevent them from reaching their destination. Alquerque. Alquerque was first mentioned by a 10th century Arab scholar, but it was included in Alfonso X's Libro de los Juegos in the 13th century, so we know that it was played at least in Spain during the latter portion of the Middle Ages. It was played on a grid with some diagonal lines. Players move a single piece along the lines to an adjacent space. Alternately, they may capture an opponent's piece by jumping over it. Capturing is mandatory, and multiple jumps are permitted, being mandatory as well if possible. If a possible capture is not made, the piece which could have made the capture is removed from the board. The winner is the first player to capture all of their opponent's pieces. Rithmomachy. The origins of Rithmomachy are unknown, but medieval scholars attribute the game to Pythagoras. Certainly it was referenced in 1030 and became popular in Germany and Belgium, reaching England by the 13th century, and being sufficiently widespread to have treatises printed in several languages in the 16th century. The game is played on an 8x16 board, with each player having 3 types of pieces: rounds, squares, and triangles. Each piece had a different number on it, and each different type moved differently. There were many different ways to perform captures, mostly involving a lot of mathematics based on the numbers on the pieces. Victory was also performed in a variety of ways, again mostly involving mathematics. It is quite complicated, and I'm not even going to attempt to explain it all. But if you're interested, a quick web search will provide all the information you need to know. Glückshaus. Glückshaus, which is German for House of Fortune, was invented in the late 15th century and quickly spread throughout Europe. It is the perfect crossover point from our board games to our dice games, because at its core it is a gambling dice game, but it uses a board for the betting. Boards can take many forms as long as it has all the numbers from 2 to 12 on it, with the exception of the number 4, which was missing from most boards. Each player antes a coin into the 7 space, which is known as the dowry or the wedding, and is marked with rings or possibly clasped hands. The 2 space is marked with pigs, and the 12 space with a crown. Each player rolls the dice once. If you roll any number other than the 2, 7, or 12, you place a single coin on the space you've rolled, unless there's already a coin there, in which case you take that coin. Rolling a 4 means that you pay a coin directly to the house. If you roll a 7, you add a coin to the dowry, regardless of how many coins are already there. If you roll a 2, you take all the coins on the board except the ones on the dowry. If you roll a 12, you take all the coins on the board, including the ones on the dowry. At this point, the game may end, or the players may choose to ante another coin and continue playing. Ship, captain, mate, and crew. The history of this game is unknown, but even if it's not historically accurate, it is a quick and easy game to play in many period settings, and is a great form of crowd interaction. I've seen performers with oversized dice standing in the lanes inviting passing children to play with them. All you need is 5 dice. Each player gets 3 throws of the dice, and the object is to get the largest crew for your ship. Before you can start hiring your crew, though, you need a ship, a captain, and a first mate. The first 6 that you roll is set aside to represent your ship. Once you have a ship, you can claim a 5 to represent your captain. If you roll a 6 and a 5 in the same throw, you may keep both. After you have a captain, the first 4 that you roll is set aside to represent the mate. This can be claimed in the same throw as the captain and, if applicable, the ship. If you get none of these results, you must roll all the dice again in your next throw. But once you have your ship, your captain, and your mate, then you start compiling your crew. The total of the 2 remaining dice is your crew. If you think you can risk it, you may use any remaining throws to try to get a higher total. After all players have had their turns, the highest total is declared the winner. This game is often played as a betting game, with the winner claiming the pot. Hazard. Hazard is a forerunner of the modern craps. It was known at least as far back as the 14th century, as it was mentioned by Chaucer in his Canterbury Tales. One player is the caster, who announces a number from 5 to 9. This number is the main. The caster then rolls 2 dice. If they roll the main, they immediately win. If they roll a 2 or a 3, they are immediately out. If the main is 5 or 9, they are also out if they roll an 11 or 12. If the main is 6 or 8, a 12 is a win, but an 11 is a loss. If the main is 7, a 12 is a loss, but an 11 is a win. If they roll any other number, the number rolled is called the chance. The caster then continues rolling until they roll the chance, which wins, the main, which loses, a 2 or 3, which loses, or an 11 or 12, which wins or loses as determined by the main as before. I hope that you have enjoyed learning a bit about some of the games that were played in the medieval and Renaissance eras. If you like what you have seen, I encourage you to learn a bit more with the links that I have provided or via your own web search. Special thanks to Richard Bird for making me aware of Glückshaus and Game of the Goose. And with that, I bid you farewell.